Hi everyone, Susanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. Today's video is going to be the making of this little number. So if you're interested in seeing that, then let's get started.
So starting with the fabric, I'm using this coating fabric I got from the textile centre. It has a little bit of stretch in it, which makes it nice and comfy. And also the main reason for choosing this fabric is that it doesn't seem to fray at the edges. And you'll see more about that later. So this is my front piece. I have 2 layers of that fabric underneath my pattern piece. The pattern piece I drafted from the starting point of my knit block. I have 1 notch at the arm, and then I have a little dot to mark here. So this is just at the edge of the shoulder seam, and I'll use that to match up with my back piece, so you'll see me mark a dot here as well. So onto that back piece, I have 2 layers of fabric underneath my pattern piece. And again here, this was just my knit block, no adjustments or anything made to this one. I have 2 notches at my arm and then another dot. So this dot is just at the edge of the shoulder and the neck, and I will match this dot to the one you seen me just mark on the front a little bit later on. That'll just help me to make sure everything's accurate around the neck. And then onto the sleeve, again 2 layers of fabric underneath my pattern piece. I'm giving myself an extra little bit of seam allowance at the side seams. Just because this is a coating fabric, I want a little bit more room in the sleeve. So just marking my notches there around the sleeve head. And then onto the pinning. So I'm just pinning up the back of the neck here and ready for stitching. So back stitching at the start, sticking to my 1 centimeter seam allowance, and back stitching at the end. And that's how that looks. And here I wanted to do a somewhat of a flat felled seam finish for this Coatigan. This one is, I'm calling it flat fell, but I'm actually not sure what it's called. So all I'm doing is each of my seams, I'm folding them in underneath and pinning them so that the raw edge is completely enclosed. So in the same way as I would do a flat fell seam, it's just I'm not doing it one seam over the other. So I'm just pinning that all down before taking it to the machine to stitch right along that crease edge. So I'm using a little bit of a longer stitch length here, back stitching at the start and the end, and trying to make sure that I'm right on the edge of the crease, as I say. Back stitching at the end, and that's from the inside how it looks. And from the outside, so a bit like a flat fell seam, but because I'm doing the same thing on the other seam, it just gives a really nice finish on the outside, which I really like. So same thing again here, back stitching at the start and the end, trying to stick to that edge. So that was the inside and this is the outside. Just love that finish. And now on to the centre back seam. So I've just pinned that all in place and stitching here at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the end. So pleased with that. And I'm going to do that same seam finish on all of the seams, but I won't make you guys sit through that. And now on to joining up the front and the back at the shoulder seams. So those dots you seen me mark earlier, I'm just popping a pin through one dot, out through the other dot, making sure they're 100% lined up, and then just pinning normally along the shoulder. And then I'm going to stitch from the dot to the edge of the shoulder on both sides. So I'm doing a few back stitches at the start because I want where that dot is to be quite strong, because that's right at the neck and the shoulder seam. So you see here, so from the dot to the edge of the shoulder, nice and neat. And now I just want to snip into that fabric right at the edge of the shoulder seam to the dot. So that will just release the fabric from the neck and that will mean I'll be able to then pin the neckline in place, which is what I'm doing here. Starting at the center, making sure that seam's totally lined up, and then I've went ahead and just pinned the rest of the seam, and I'm going to stitch from one dot to the other dot, sticking to my 1 centimeter seam allowance the whole way across. And I'm making sure here that I am starting and stopping stitching at those dots. It's quite important just to make sure that that's nice and neat. And that's how it looks, so super neat, so really pleased with that. And then I'm just showing here that I have went ahead and finished all those seams in the same manner as the neck seam I showed at the start. So it just gives a really nice neat finish on the inside, but on the outside those 2 lines of stitching I think make it look just nice and professional. I really like it. So onto the sleeve. First of all, pinning at the sleeve edges, then making sure my notches match up, then the shoulder seam, and then just evenly distributing the sleeve fabric across the underarm seam and pinning, and now stitching at my 1 centimeter seam allowance the whole way around. So I'm trying to be as accurate as I can be here, just to make sure that this is super neat and that lovely curve of the sleeve seam is maintained, and that's how it looks from the outside. And then again I've done the same finish at that sleeve seam, so super pleased with that. And now I'm nearly at the end, just to close up the side seams. So I'm starting at the bottom of the sleeve, stitching at my 1 centimeter seam allowance the whole way along, making sure when I get to that underarm piece that my seams line up perfectly, back stitching at the start and the end, and you'll see here I think I did manage to get that lined up, so really pleased with that. And then for the sleeve I can't do the same finish at the sleeve, so all I've done here is snip down one of the seams by about 2/3, and then I'm just folding the other seam over the top just to enclose that raw edge. So this will just give a really neat finish. I won't get the 2 lines of stitching on the outside, but it'll just make sure everything's nice and neat on the inside. So super pleased with that. So I mentioned at the start that this fabric choice was quite important for this design, and the reason for that is I'm not hemming any of this little Coatigan. So because I'm not doing that, I want to make sure that all of the edges are really clean. So everything's nice and straight, there's no sort of jagged edges at all. So using the ruler and the rotary cutter helps me do that. So love that. So I'm just showing here all the finishes around the inside, all of those seams, how I have that nice double line of stitching around all of the seams on the outside, around the armholes, down the side seams, and then that raw hem and neckline. So this is how it looks on. So I love the length of this. I love how the back is nicely fitted. I love the higher neck at the back and that beautiful sort of waterfall ribbony effect at the front. I love the amount of room I have in it, how comfy it is, how cozy and warm it is. I love it.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do, and I shall see you on Friday in my next one. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye folks!